Hey guys, this is Butch from the Vintage Media Grading Podcast. And before we start, I just want to give a shameless plug to Vintage Media Grading. VMG is your source for grading, authenticating, and slabbing your precious vinyl records. In addition, we offer a host of other services, including cleaning and sticker removal, as well as soft grading, which is a way to get your albums graded, but still allow you to spin your records and listen to your tunes. Come visit us at www.vmgvinyl.com to place your orders, or feel free to contact us at info@vmgvinyl.com. Hope you enjoy the podcast. And welcome back to the Vintage Media Grading Podcast number 6. We have not been around for the last month and a half. I'd like to say it was because we were doing exciting things, but it was out of sheer laziness. Would you agree?
Yep.
Agree.
100% the reason.
It seems that, you know, when you're sitting around doing nothing over Christmas break, it's very difficult to just sit in front of a computer and talk about a band and their records. Quite sad.
We were on vacation.
Yeah, well, you have to honor vacation. The vacation is serious. We're now off vacation. Chad is back at work. He's thrilled.
My least favorite day of the year.
Yep. Yep. And we are without our usual captain, Andrew Hoffman, who has his nose to the grindstone. That's not even the right metaphor. I'm mixing metaphors, but he has his
he's working to the
pedal. Yeah, he's working hard. He's grading. He's removing stickers. He's cleaning albums. He's doing VMG work while we slack off doing a VMG podcast. So the good news is that there's no way he'll ever listen to this, so we can just talk about him all we want, because he, like the rest of our listeners, probably won't listen.
No, our moms are our mom. My mom has been asking when's the next podcast coming out.
Okay, all right. Well, all right. So she's excited for it. Drew actually is a devoted listener. So he will definitely listen to it. So we'll have to keep our ragging on Drew to a minimum. I am Butch Harwood, co-founder of VMG, and we've got Chad and Paul Brayman, brothers and co-founders of VMG. And today's topic is rock legends Van Halen. And I'm willing to bet that by the end of this, we have made 0 Van Halen fans happy and many Van Halen fans quite angry.
It probably doesn't help that the number one thing that comes to mind when I hear Van Halen is Crystal Clear Pepsi.
Yeah.
And
that's probably not what a diehard Van Halen fan wants to hear.
No, well,
I lost you guys for a second. All right.
Things are going. We've been on break, and Paul's in and out. You back, Paul?
Sure. I think so. They keep
on
Wi-Fi. I don't know.
We're struggling without Drew.
We are struggling. I'm glad no one can see us, because actually, Paul looks like a venture capitalist. You look like a serial. Chad's in a dank basement that appears to have Polaroids of dead bodies, probably scattered on the floor. I look like an unshaven cat burglar. My ridiculous hat on.
It's a podcast, not a YouTube video. So
that's right. So no one will be seeing this. Yeah, great reason. Unattractive people do not do well on YouTube videos. It's a general rule.
Face for podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're going to talk about Van Halen. I actually really dig Van Halen. And here's the thing that's going to turn all the Van Halen fans against me, except probably maybe 15% of them, when I say that I'm a bigger fan of Sammy Hagar than I am of David Lee Roth.
Oof.
And I love pop rock. I love cheesy 80s rock and some of 5150, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. And for Lawful Carnal Knowledge, they lean in, and OU812, they really lean into some of that synthy pop rock. Quite frankly, I love it, and I'm not going to apologize.
And no need to apologize. That's what makes music so great. Is everybody likes their own thing, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes when it comes to hair metal, cheesier the better. My Van Halen pick now. I don't think Van Halen has any super rare albums that really jump off that are obvious, but the one I would pick is the Merry Melody promo. It was released a few months before their debut album, and it's an interesting album. It was sent to radio stations, so it wasn't for sale. I wouldn't call it rare. You can find it on eBay or Discogs. Just about there's plenty of them out there.
And some counterfeits too.
There's counterfeits, and there's also bootlegs. They seem fairly easy to tell the difference. The blue vinyl is an unofficial release. I think it's European. And there's the color on the cover just isn't right. It's a little bit lighter. The correct one should have a red vinyl with red Van Halen, like the very old original Van Halen logo. It's quite a bit different from what you're used to seeing. And then the other one side's red, the other side's blue, where it says Van Halen across the top. The album itself is, to me, interesting just because it's a few months before their album came out. The backstory,
January 78. Yep.
Yeah, it's basically a running with the devil single, pretty much, isn't it? 12-inch single.
It's got like 5 tracks on it. I don't have it in front of me. I think running with the devil, Eruption.
You really got me.
You really got me.
Really got me.
Jamie's crying and Ice Cream Man.
Yep.
Pretty much hits.
The album, the backstory behind the album is pretty interesting, and I got it from Nate Goyer I was listening to some of his old podcasts, and the cover song on the album, You Really Got Me, was Eddie Van Halen was playing some of the tracks for one of the local bands in that club scene, Angel, and they really liked that version of it. So the story goes that the record label was afraid that other bands were going to release that cover before the Van Halen album hit the stores. So they released a promo or a sampler to send to radio stations. That's the story anyway that I heard. I couldn't find any reason. I don't know why they have the Looney Tunes logo on there. And
they're Warner Brothers. They're Warner Brothers. I don't know why. Obviously Looney Tunes is a Warner Brothers commodity, but I don't know if that was just something. I don't know the answer to that, but I actually just wonder if Warner Brothers, was like, well, this is easy. We can just put this on there. We're Warner Brothers. Why don't we? I don't know the reason why they.
That's honestly what it seems like. There's no. I couldn't find any definitive reason why Warner Brothers picked that, and I do know though that they Van Halen bootlegs and some unofficial releases use that logo, use the Looney Tunes Merry Melodies logo, which would be unofficial. This is the only official Van Halen release that I'm aware of anyway that has that logo on there, and it's really an untitled album. It just has Van Halen's name on a black cover. And it says Merry Melodies on the back, but it's it hits all the spots for me. It's like I said, I wouldn't call it rare. Like you can buy it pretty much any time, but it's more rare than their self-title, and they're technically their first release, and it's cool red vinyl.
Yeah, it's cool. It's one of those ones that are like, it's rare enough that it kind of, rounds out your epic record collection. It's got great songs on it, so it's not like some bizarre, esoteric, bunch of songs. And it's also not incredibly rare. So it's something I think we'll have to keep in mind when we pick the album of the week or the vinyl of the week at the end.
No, I was just saying it's cool because it's really the only kind of pre-Van Halen 1 release by anybody in the band. Like usually a lot of bands will have one member that put out an EP or a single or something like that. But for Van Halen, the 4 main members, the original members, that's their first album is Van Halen 1. That none of them ever did anything pre-Van Halen. So it's kind of cool to have one like kind of unique pre-Van Halen 1 release.
I was looking for they were called Mammoth before
Eddie Van Halen's band. Yeah, but they never, as far as I know, they never released anything.
No, I couldn't find anything. And David Lee Roth was also in a band before. He was named after some sneakers. Had 3 names. I forgot what it was called.
Yeah, it was Red Ball Jets.
Yeah,
was a band, and they were a cover band, I think. Nothing's
released from them either. So it is, it is cool that it's their first release. You can still find them sealed. Like I see sealed ones pop up on eBay or Discogs like fairly frequently.
They're not incredibly expensive either. They're in the hundreds, between 100 and 200, I think.
I bought a sealed one. I took a chance on a sealed one that it looked like to me the shrink was just was just dirty, but it was the entire album had like water damage. The records, I ended up opening it because the cover was so wavy and damaged. But the record's perfect, but the cover was no good. So it's still on my want list.
I mean, as far as to me, the coolest stuff about Van Halen is kind of Eddie Van Halen, pre-Van Halen, pre-Van Halen the band. And my son, who wants to be a guitarist, he is obsessed with Eddie Van Halen. And the idea that, it's just so cool that when he was in high school, I mean, people, in Southern California, Pasadena, people were like knew of him in high school. He was like all the high school kids would go and just listen to him play guitar. And he was, a well-known commodity before they even, Van Halen even signed a record contract. And from what I recall, I believe Gene Simmons from Kiss had a major impact on them signing their record contract.
Yeah,
we think the name Simmons, Van Halen was incredibly stupid from what I recall.
From what I read, Gene Simmons wanted to sign him, and Paul Stanley didn't because he was intimidated by how popular Van Halen was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, it was just amazing that at the time, and it's kind of what, it's like it's the dream of every guitarist learning guitar when they're 13, 14, and 15. I mean, he was just, probably slaying babes and just dominating Southern California all by himself, Eddie Van Halen.
They were like a touring band for a long time before they got a record deal. I'm going to say they started in 74, and the self-titled wasn't released until 78, I think. And so all that time is just doing shows, like what we hear in the behind the music, the Sunset Strip, and like the Whiskey, things like that. It's pretty crazy that they're playing for almost 4 years or more without ever really having an album or anything to tour behind.
The stuff about Eddie Van Halen growing up and playing in garages and getting everybody to come over and watch. And then he, I'm sure he did not truly invent it, although he's been credited with inventing it. The 2-hand tapping on the neck of the guitar, which is now kind of just universally done. But when he would do it, he would famously turn his back to the audience so that no one could see what he was doing, so that no one could copy him. Because allowed him to truly shred, quickly. But I mean, the guy was a genius. He was awesome.
He comes from doesn't he have a classical music or jazz background? His family was.
Yep. Definitely.
He was trained on piano, I think, before guitar.
Yep. All right, so going through the, I for some reason have 4 copies of Van Halen's first album, self-titled album, which is a fantastic album. It is a start to finish listen. Unfortunately, it is a style that I don't love. I actually don't love the idea, and I get it. You really got me was a cover, and then with Diver Down later, they got into a lot more covers, and a lot of their most famous popular songs to hit the radios in their early years, their first 5 years, end up being covers. It was Pretty Woman or Dancing in the Streets or You Really Got Me. But Van Halen, the first album, obviously epic. You Really Got Me, Run with the Devil, Jamie's Crying, Ain't Talking About Love. Those are all ones people generally know right off the bat. Van Halen 2, less well known by, I think, the general public. Beautiful Girls and Dance the Night Away, probably most obviously known. Women and Children First, which you can, and the thing about all these is that these were 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, and then obviously 1984 came out for 1984. These are all easily found, and so they're not uber collectible in that you can still find them. You can still find them in the original shrink a lot of time. You can still find them in great shape, and there weren't a ton. There really weren't any super rare variants to any of these, and so collectible wise. As Drew always talks about, one to grab, one to slab. Most of these are really to grab and play rather than slabbing, unless you have a Van Halen. And I think the Merry Melodies, I would consider their pre-rookie card, I guess, from, and I guess you'd consider Van Halen self-titled their rookie. I don't know what you would.
Yeah. The Merry Melodies is the one that I think would be the one to get as a collectible. The self-titled album is, I want a sealed one that's on my want list. The issue with that is it's hard to tell what variant it is when it's sealed. Right. So it's nearly impossible, if not impossible, to get a sealed one and know that it's actually a U.S. first pressing. The Merry Melodies is, exactly what you're getting. It's not repressed. Unless it's a bootleg, again, which they're not exact replicas, so they're pretty easy to tell the difference. Just don't get, tricked by, if you see a blue one, it's unofficial. That, like I said, their self-title though is, there's at any given day 50 or 100 of them available for sale. But a real mint one opened, that can be collectible, I think, because
it's got a black cover. The cover is so dark, easy to easily, so it's definitely condition sensitive.
I actually think their most collectible stuff is their later stuff, like in the dead era of the 90s, because Van Halen was popular for a long time. From 78 all the way to the early 90s, they had big hits, big radio hits, and we grew up in the 80s and the early 90s when Right Now came out, and it was a massive hit, the Crystal Clear Pepsi commercial. But that album that it was on, Unlawful Cardinal Knowledge, was only released in the U.S. on vinyl as a club version. So you could only get that on vinyl through a mail order. So that one is pretty pricey. It's pretty expensive. It came out in 91, which is that era of vinyl, the grunge era, where that vinyl era is just expensive because it wasn't pressed a ton of copies. But that one, a US version of it, is pretty rare because it was only a mail order Columbia House release.
Right.
So that a nice display would be that album, a sealed bottle of Crystal Clear Pepsi,
sealed jar of Crystal Clear gravy.
Yeah, I think the Crystal Clear gravy is an absolute necessity. Right. I was waiting for that. Yeah. Have you watched that since? I didn't realize, and I didn't realize that that which is for those listening or for the person listening, Drew, Crystal Clear Gravy was a skit on Saturday Night Live, and I always thought they actually used the Right Now, but no, they just used like a generic song that kind of sounds like
a generic like synth.
Yeah, synth song. Yeah, that's such a great song though. It's so it's fantastic. I mean, come on. If you and I'm sorry, like anybody who go back and like read reviews of 5150, which was Sammy Hagar's first album, and they just get crushed. And it's just such, to me, it's like such hardo criticism. Like you're just not allowed to like, love Sammy Hagar or appreciate anything they were doing. Anyone who listens to 5150 and doesn't think that is an amazing album start to finish, it's amazing. I mean, listen, I was playing it the other day. My wife didn't even know what I was playing, and she's like, I know every single one of these songs. I'm like, yes, everybody knows every single one of these songs. You don't even realize. Yeah, like Love Walks In, Summer Nights, Best of Both Worlds, Dreams, Why Can't This Be Love? These are like, you might not even know if I say Dreams, you might be like, I don't know what that is. When you hear it, you're like,
you'll know.
I know that. Balance was 95, which is also rare. That one usually goes for about 300, in mint condition, sealed on eBay or on Discogs. Balance, being 95.
Yeah, just 90 stuff. And then Van Halen 3, the great Gary Sharon era, that album never came out on vinyl officially.
Right. Yeah, there's an unofficial by, I don't even remember what country.
Somewhere in Europe, a couple of European ones, I think.
Croatia or something like that.
Even that was in like the early 2014, or it was a ways later. I think Van Halen 3 was 98.
Right. Yeah, right. Yep. Let's see. There are things to discuss. I'm looking at most valuable albums here. You're right, Paul. So, the most valuable albums, Merry Melodies #1, Sealed, Van Halen #1 has gone for between $350 and $1,000. But again, that's always tough because when you're on eBay, you'll see people say sealed first pressing, and if it's sealed, you're probably going to be difficult to discern the first pressing, and they probably don't really know.
Because that was,
and then it
Van Halen 1 was,
Van
Halen 1 was even repressed in '78, so there was two different pressings in the first year.
Right, which gets to kind of the difficulty and why we, at Vintage Media Grading have made the decision not to label our labels as first pressing, because it just gets to this question of what is the first pressing? Is it the first pressing, of the first issue? So if it was issued but pressed at 3 different pressing plants, you have to figure out what the first pressing was. If it's like baseball cards where they, release cards, but then they release, more boxes a month later, but they're all considered rookie cards, would both of those be considered first pressings? I would say no. 2 separate pressings in 1978 should probably not be both considered first pressings. So it becomes, especially in the 70s, almost impossible to determine first pressings.
70s,
even if it's open, like you said, because you don't really know exactly what's the very first pressing. So we just we label, we get all the information that we can and put that on the label, and collectors can discern what they want from it.
Right. Opened, it's a lot easier to narrow down. There's usually something either on the label that's unique, or the matrix code, or
But I think he's saying I think he's saying like sometimes like it's hard for anybody else who wasn't working at the pressing plants to actually know which pressing plant was the first pressing. It came out at 3 different pressing plants and or whatever. I don't know how many for Van Halen's first. Probably, would have been a handful, which is the first pressing. Or do you just count them all as the first pressing? Or, does everything in 1978 count as the first pressing? And it just gets to be much more confusing. Because I think, ideally there would be one first pressing. Like maybe it's just I don't have their pressings in front of me. Maybe it's just the Compton pressing, or the...
they had like a gold press and a Winchester.
Winchester. Yep. So
you were going through the most valuable ones, which they're
sorry. So most valuable ones looks like Merry Melodies, which has gone for $1,000, believe it or not, which I did not. I was wrong. I thought 100, but it's actually hundreds of dollars.
I think
it went for $1,000.
$1,000's high.
Yeah, 1,000 was probably the highest.
You can routinely see them sealed for less than $500, I think.
Okay. Sealed Van Halen, Sealed first album has gone between 350 and 1,000. Sealed Club of Foreign Love for Carnal Knowledge is between 400 and 900. But that 900 was best offer, so it probably got less than that. Sealed Balance, 350 to 700. They're a different kind of truth, which was their 2012 album.
It's like the comeback, right?
There was a red version of that was limited to 700, and that one actually goes for around $500. A Sealed Van Halen 2, you're talking 400. And then from there, it gets down under 400. Fair Warning, Diver Down, 1984, Sealed. These are all sealed.
But you could probably buy the whole David Lee Roth collection open very cheaply if you wanted to, because there's so many questions of it. And up until the 90s. Anything in the 90s is going to be kind of expensive. But all the 70s and 80s stuff get pretty cheap.
You guys grew up, at least Chad grew up in the 80s. What was your first introduction to David Lee Roth, Chad? Like, did you have any, like, inkling as to, Van Halen in the mid-80s, or were you just...
California Girls?
Okay.
Yeah.
So...
I'm just a gigolo.
In 84, 85, you were too concentrated on the 1985 Chicago Bears to worry about.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I wasn't into Van Halen until much late, like the later like 90s, really, or like early 90s. Probably, honestly, I mean, I knew Hot for Teacher probably, and all of those songs, Panama. But it was probably as stupid as we were making fun of it, but like the crystal clear Pepsi commercial, I was probably 11 when that came out, or 12. I thought that song was awesome.
Yeah. Unfortunately, crystal clear Pepsi, not awesome. Didn't like it at all. Paul, didn't they just come out with crystal clear Pepsi again?
They did, yeah. A couple of years ago, they like reissued it, and it surprisingly flopped again.
Yeah. Strange for a soda aficionado like myself to not have actually went out and gotten it. I mean, soda is my life. I didn't even go get it, but I remember drinking it once in 1991 and being kind of disgusted. Although I think if I drank it blindfolded, I would have been fine with it. But it tastes a little medicine-y, I feel like.
Paul, do you remember? I remember when our mom came home.
I do remember that,
like a 2-liter bottle of it, and it was like, this is like so futuristic, and we thought it was like
it did taste a lot like Pepsi. It just
did it. I must have been
that. I remember. We were. I was 8 years old. I don't know. From what I remember tasting like Pepsi.
Yeah, I remember not liking it, but maybe I was just tricked by seeing something clear. It's tough if you like. If you think something's orange juice, but it's actually water or something else. You just
a ridiculous
can't handle it.
Yeah,
a really dumb tangent was when I was working at the Town Beach, so it was like 95 parking lot, and I had a thermos, and I was drinking. I'm like, this is the worst lemonade I've ever had. And I opened it; it was iced tea. It's like,
how much of it did you drink until you realized it was iced tea? Oh yeah, that's good.
I don't know. Several sips. I was like, oh, this is disgusting. Then when I opened it and realized it wasn't what I thought it was, and it was actually good tasting iced tea.
Yeah. I actually think the music video for Jump, which you guys are obviously familiar with, right? It is possibly the greatest display of jumping that a human being has ever done. David Lee Roth actually was. I think that's the first music video I ever saw. There was we used to tape. We didn't have cable in the little neighborhood of Bradford that we lived in, which is where the poor folks lived, and I say that lovingly as a poor folk myself at the time. Maybe I'll cut that out so I don't offend everybody in Bradford. But we didn't have cable there. They didn't offer cable, so we had to watch music videos on Friday Night Videos, which was they would show videos at 11 o'clock, I think, at night on Fridays, and we would tape it on VHS. I'm pretty sure that was the first video I ever saw. Maybe that, and Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Can't remember. And I only remember that because of Captain Lou Albano, of course, being in it.
A legendary video.
Right. And I just realized like 3 months ago that I actually thought Captain Lou Albano was Cyndi Lauper's dad. until about 3 months ago. That's how stupid I am. Because in that video, he played her dad, and I said, "Oh, that's cool. He's your dad." And then I just realized 3 months ago, that's not true at all. He was just acting, which
I never realized.
That's how good of an actor he was. I mean, I think he was up for an Oscar. So
his gimmick was so strange looking back on it. Like he had elastic bands attached to his face.
Yeah,
like not on his beard. Like
just it.
Sewn,
yeah, like pins in his face.
Pinned to his face.
But who did he even manage? Like, who was it? Who did he manage in the? He was a WWF guy.
Cindy
he's definitely WWF guy. He was definitely like popular and significant enough. He had a 1985 Topps card, Series 1, which means
and he had a figure too.
Yeah, and he was on the cartoon that used to come on Saturday mornings. I mean, he was like a main character on the cartoon. It was like Hulk Hogan, Junkyard Dog, Roddy Piper, Captain Lou, and Big John Studd. I mean, those were in every episode. And yeah, Captain Lou. I don't know what he was in
the. He was in the Goonies video too, right? Was he? Wasn't he? I think so. The Cyndi Lauper Goonies song. I got to look it up, but I think he was.
Did he manage? Did he manage Hulk Hogan in the like WrestleMania 1 era?
Yeah, it would have been like around, because wasn't Cyndi Lauper at WrestleMania 1? Wasn't she? I think she was at WrestleMania 1 with him.
Yeah,
WrestleMania 1 had a ton of like Muhammad Ali was there, Liberace was there, and I'm pretty sure Cyndi Lauper. I'm 100% sure Cyndi Lauper was there. And
she was Captain there Lou. With like Wendy Richter.
Oh, possibly. Oh yeah, maybe.
We're deep diving WWF.
Well, I mean, we only had so much information to talk about Van Halen. Anyway, interesting about Van Halen's jump was that that David Lee Roth. Oh, I don't know if you were going to say this, but David Lee Roth was really into karate at the time, and he directed that video and directed it in such a way as to give himself as many jumps where he looked athletic throughout the video, because he was so amazed by his own jumping ability that he just kept doing. Watch the video. He just kept doing jumps and freezing them and being like, "I look awesome in this jump," and he would do another jump. So that video was basically an homage to David Lee Roth's amazing jumping ability. And I wonder if he wrote the song because he just thought he was such a good jumper.
David Lee Roth is a awesome frontman.
That's amazing character. Yeah, I mean, he was everything you want a frontman to be. Like, it's. I don't even know that his voice was that great. I mean, who knows? I don't know. He was just. He was kind of evidence that like you don't need to be, Whitney Houston's voice to be a rock star. That's what I keep telling like my son when he's trying to put a band together. I'm like, you just got to get a frontman. Just got to get a frontman. It doesn't matter if he sings that great. Get a frontman. Someone who, is crazy enough to make the California Girls video and be hanging off the side of a cliff for another video and just jumping because he loves to jump. Everybody loves to jump. But I mean, was it the greatest jump ever? I mean, I think Chris Cross would consider that their jump was better.
Maybe House of Pain.
But they were jumping around more than they were just jumping. So I think you have to give it to either Chris Cross.
What about Jumpin' Jack Flash, the Stones?
Yeah, that's a good jump. It's a good jump. Or I thought you were talking about Jumping Jack Flash, the Whoopi Goldberg movie, which came out in the 1980s, which wasn't as good of a jump.
I think he definitely beat Chris Cross. Their jumping was definitely stymied by
their backwards pants. Yeah, obviously. That's true. I did just double check, and Captain Lou was in the Goonies Are Good Enough video. There's like a skit before the video. It's Cyndi Lauper too, so maybe he was her dad. We got to look that up.
He wasn't. I looked it up because I was pretty convinced of it, and then I actually got down this rabbit hole a few weeks, maybe a couple months ago, where I was like, why was Captain Lou Albano actually famous? Like, I don't remember him doing anything in the WWF, because I've gotten deep into some WWF history with this what's it called, Dark Side of the Ring series I've been watching on Hulu, and then I'm just and I just couldn't remember. It's so weird because 1985 Captain Lou was probably next to Michael J. Fox and Mr. T in the top 5 most important people in my life, and maybe next to my mom. I mean, it was just like he was that important, and yet I don't know why. Like, why was he so important to me? I don't know. He was a pop culture legend.
So another.
Is he still alive?
I doubt it.
I would highly doubt it. Shit. If he is,
another,
take it all back, and we'd love to have him on the next podcast.
Yeah. And there aren't many 80s WWF people who are still alive.
No, that's true.
Anyway,
what were you going to say, Paul? We should
another
probably get back.
Pop culture Van Halen reference is obviously Back to the Future 1, when Michael J. Fox is playing for his dad, and he pops in the cassette, and he's dressed in like the spacesuit, and the cassette says Edward Van Halen on it. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I always thought it was Eruption that he was playing, but it is Van Halen playing, but it's just noisy riffs that he recorded for Back to the Future. It's not a song on another album or anything. It's just something he made up, like 2 seconds, basically, a few quick noisy riffs, and it's not another song. It's not a Van Halen song. It's just it is Van Halen, but made it for Back to the Future. And
of course, there's the Michael Jackson reference too that he's uncredited on.
Yep. Beat it, right?
And the story that is, he did it. They weren't allowed to do work for other bands or artists or something. Is that why he was uncredited?
I think he just turned down he didn't even get paid for it. He actually, I think he filled in for. It was supposed to be Pete Townsend, I think, on that from the Who, and Townsend couldn't do it, and recommended Eddie Van Halen to do it. It was kind of a quick, kind of spur of the moment thing.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, another actually, I should put it. The world is a worse place that we don't idolize like just random guitarists anymore, and that everybody in the world doesn't know the name of their favorite guitarist or WWF manager anymore, like they did in 1985 when monoculture was the thing, where everybody knew the same things and watched the same things. Miss those days. I mean, it's amazing that we can sit here and all live the exact same experience, admiring Captain Lou Albano.
Captain Lou, for no reason that we know of.
No, apparently just because he put elastic bands in his face.
Yeah, he had a figure, didn't he? Did he have an LJN figure?
Yeah, he definitely had a figure. Yeah. He had like the blue, like a vest, like a white T-shirt.
Yeah.
Just was like sitting like this. You couldn't really use him to do anything. I'm still baffled by the elastic bands like embedded into his face.
Yeah, I was just looking up some pictures. I'm trying to figure out how he. Oh yeah, no, they're just I mean, he was genius. He was genius before his time. Yeah, people weren't putting things in their face back then.
No, I have a whole culture of
right
people, random piercings. Captain Lou started it all.
Right, and we've already lost the Van Halen fans who were planning on, and hopefully some people just randomly flipping through podcasts like they do radio stations just happen to land on us talking.
The Captain Lou fans are flocking in.
Right. They're texting each other right now. They're like, "Oh my god, this guy!" They're talking Captain Lou.
They're dropping giant submarine sandwiches and tuning in.
Cyndi Lauper, she's calling. She's ready to come in. Want to talk about Cyndi Lauper?
More Captain Lou talk. Didn't he play something in the Mario Brothers? Wasn't he Mario?
I think. Was he?
Like an 80s Mario movie?
Might have been. Maybe he just looked like Mario, but I think he might have been Mario. Oh, well, now we got to find this out.
For the record, Captain Lou and Van Halen don't cross over one bit.
No, not at all. Actually, and as a matter of fact, we have. It's sad to say that Drew missed the this podcast, and we drove it completely into the ground. Yes, he was on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, but he was not in the movie Super Mario Brothers. But he was Mario in the Super Mario Brothers Super Show in 1989.
We're throwing out deep Van Halen cuts, deep Captain Lou cuts.
Drew is so disgusted right now.
This is what happens when there's no structure and we lose the host of the podcast. Quickly goes off something else.
Let's get back to Van Halen. All right, give me your favorite Van Halen song. We at least need to give the Van Halen fans that. Chad, you already said Right Now, right?
I don't know. Hot for Teacher is a pretty cool song too.
Yeah, great video, obviously. I mean, I'm not going out on a limb there. Classic. I mean, just everything classic about a video that stands the test of time, while at the same time being so obviously cancelable in 2024 that if we probably would never have the joy of seeing it or even hearing the lyrics in 2024.
Yeah. I mean, it has
also
all
part of a great movie scene in Varsity Blues with the teacher who's the strippers.
Probably
Tan.
also
Every kid's dream.
Tan.
And all right, so I mean, mine would have to be Panama, which I think is amazing. Which I also, grew up assuming was about a girl, but it's actually about a car. I didn't realize that put your hands between your legs and ease the seat back was actually referring to putting your hands between your legs for the seat adjustment and push the seat back. I didn't realize that. But it's
What do
about
you think
a car.
it was?
Put your hands between your legs and ease the seat back. I don't know. I thought he was telling somebody. Yeah, I thought he was giving someone.
I still think that. I'm not believing it's about a car. You're
Yeah,
ruining
it
the
is
song.
about a
You're
car.
ruining
Yeah.
the song for me.
But fantastic song, fantastic lyrics. I think it's their best song. I think it's even though I like 5150 as their best album, that's my favorite song.
We just lured back in our Bradford listeners that were jumping after you badmouth the Bradford area.
Mm-hmm.
No, songs about a car is
Right,
bringing them right back.
right. And then there was wasn't off 5150. It was off OU812, which is When It's Love, which had a classic video. Which I don't know if you guys remember this. Do you remember anything about the video When It's Love?
No.
You don't remember this? When he at the end he holds up his index and finger and thumb, and then index finger and other thumb, and just raises them over his head,
Like the
and I
Triforce?
just remember that. Yeah, like yes, like they're like they are the masters of the universe, and it's it had a huge impact on me because I would do that every time I listened to the song. And then I married my wife, who was telling me that when she was growing up, her and cousin Mike Thompson and Christy and Jimmy, who were her neighbors in Westerly, Rhode Island. Cousin Mike Thompson, now a great drummer, by the way. Shout out to cousin Mike Thompson. Not my cousin, but I think he's Chad's fake cousin's cousin. Right?
Yes.
He's not your cousin. No, he's Chad's
He's
fake
not our
cousin.
cousin.
He's Corey's.
Yeah.
He's Corey's cousin, who's my fake cousin. So
Okay, so he's Chad's fake cousin once removed.
Yep.
They had a band called the Young Rockers, which I believe featured my wife Vanessa on the tennis racket and Mike Thompson on the drums, and they played that song When It's Love, and the most important thing they did was the Van Halen symbol over their head, and I thought to myself, this is the person that I'm going to marry.
So I finally actually have an interesting Van Halen tidbit. So their logo, the wing logo that is very popular, that you think Van Halen, that's what you think of, was a complete ripoff of a Jimi Hendrix logo that had a J and an H with like wings, and the J was like pointed on the bottom instead of round, and they just modified it ever so slightly to make it a V instead of a J.
Wow.
Similar
was
to the
that
Aerosmith logo too. The Aerosmith wing logo is around that, that same era.
Maybe Aerosmith ripped off Hendrix as well.
So was that like a controversy? or like did the estate of Jimi Hendrix like come after them or anything for that?
Not that I know of. No. Well, obviously not. If
It's still the logo, they still use it. Right?
Yeah. And then they changed it for the Hagar era. It became it went, instead of just wings, it was more like round.
Yeah, it went like a circle, like a ring in the back. Yeah. Which is a cool logo. I mean, I got to say, I think that's a cooler logo. Once again, the Hagar, the Hagar era just leaves the David Lee Roth era in the dust, as I'm sure all the Van Halen fans agree. Or maybe they don't, because they probably don't. And I've read enough online to know that the true Van Halen fans are not happy with any Sammy Hagar fans in general, or at least a lot of Van Halen fans.
Oh yeah, it is similar to it.
Similar, it's identical. It's exactly.
Other than the word Jimi Hendrix,
right? And a J.
Would have been bold if they kept the word Jimi Hendrix right.
It would have been really poor marketing. They're just marketing.
Would have been a lot like McDowell's, like just.
Yeah, they wisely, very crafty, took Jimi Hendrix off of the logo.
Mm-hmm. Well, they figured. Without that on there, who would ever notice?
Right.
I'm digging their logo. I'm digging the gold. The gold 86 to 98 has a little bit of a VMG style color to it. It's a good logo. Their Mammoth logo, not a good logo. I'm looking at their Mammoth logo. Can't even read it. So that was probably not created by a someone for $9 on Fiverr, but was instead probably created on the back of someone's notebook in 11th grade, I'm guessing. It was never a big... Did you guys draw... when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, all of my book covers and my notebooks were just filled with rock band stuff. I would draw Kiss, I would draw Poison, Def Leppard. I had them all memorized.
Yep.
Yeah, Van Halen, which I really did like in those years, the 5150 OU812 era. I really never really got into drawing their logo.
Yeah, because they had like an actual. I drew. Probably because Van Halen was more of a logo. Like Def Leppard had a font that just said Def Leppard. Same with Kiss. It was Kiss, but with like the it looked like Z's, like lightning bolts with the two S's.
And Poison, you're right. It was the whole.
Poison, it was like kind of in cursive. It was like their name. Their name was their font was their logo.
Yeah, I guess I should have probably paid more attention to Van Halen. I don't know what it was in the 80s. I think it was because from a stance of staunch heterosexuality, he just wasn't as attractive as a frontman as Bret Michaels was. And I just like Sammy Hagar at the time. He just I didn't strive to be him. Didn't strive to be with him.
Sammy Hagar cracks me. Not Sammy Hagar. David Lee Roth cracks me up though, and I like him much more now than I did when the thing with Van Halen is they don't really. They're a true rock band. They're not like a hair band. They're not similar to like Aerosmith. Like I went through a hair band phase where I was really into and I'm still. It wasn't a phase. I love hair bands, but like Poison, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, things like that. Van Halen never really. They're a real band. They're not like a hair.
Yeah.
band.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Right. They weren't just 3 power chords, which was basically every Poison song, and they were a legit band for sure. They were legit band that pre-existed, like Aerosmith. They obviously pre-existed the hair band era, and then kind of, for marketing purposes, became a hair band or tried, much like Kiss did, much like Cheap Trick, tried to do with the Flame. They tried to, and what Aerosmith obviously did with Angel and. Some of their later 80s stuff like Love in an Elevator and Janie's Got a Gun, where they tried to become hair bands. Kiss was probably the most egregious sellouts of the, of shifting to. Well, Kiss was basically a sellout in everything they did. I mean, that was basically.
Are you calling Gene Simmons a sellout?
Yeah, right. I mean, like they basically were, that was their whole shtick, was that they were a sellout. They were unabashed sellouts.
But now I couldn't probably really appreciate that. They're in it for the money,
right?
So, I don't criticize sellouts.
David Lee Roth is hilarious, though.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the nostalgia of like 80s MTV. There's actually a book called "I Want My MTV," and it's an oral history. But they devote a lot to David Lee Roth because the start of MTV was really, 1984, the album, and David Lee Roth himself. And when he went solo, with California Girls, that was really, really the heyday of MTV. And it was just, I mean, him, Billy Idol, and Cyndi Lauper were basically, carrying the torch for MTV back then. He was fantastic.
The California Girls video is I vividly remember that. I can picture David Lee Roth's face just looking at the girls.
Right. I vividly remember too, although I don't vividly remember David Lee Roth in it as much as he's not the thing I remember most about it, but yep.
Well, it's a Van Halen podcast, not a smut podcast.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, I was at that point, I'd already watched I'd probably caught a glimpse of Lita Ford, and my life had changed. And so once California Girls came on, I wasn't paying attention to David Lee Roth anymore. My wife's well aware that Lita Ford changed my life, and that her, which I can't even remember the name of the song. "Kiss Me Deadly," of course.
Kiss Me Deadly.
Yeah. It changed my life forever. Turned me into a man at the ripe age of 8. Never turned back. Anyway, all right. Well, that was an hour. Shockingly, we managed to extend 3 bits of knowledge about Van Halen and Van Halen albums into an hour of Captain Lou talk and a little bit of late, smut adjacent talk. But we need to pick.
Drew just texted me, "How's the podcast going?" And
and you responded, Drew, this will probably be the last one we've ever done.
It's going to be edited down to about 12 or 13 minutes.
I said standard, pretty awful.
Yep. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's actually our best podcast because,
Cyndi Lauper and Captain Lou are psyched about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're right. And Sammy Hagar's, he just found his biggest fan, Sammy Hagar. He's probably been ruining the day that everybody badmouths him as taking over for Van Halen. And now he's found a true fan. And Gary Sharon, Paul is his biggest fan, which I think we settled, I believe. Didn't you say Gary Sharon was their best front man? I think you said that around the 15-minute mark.
Yeah, it's just a shame that it never came out on vinyl.
No.
I also love More Than Words. So Gary Sharon's
right. Well,
a little bit more well known for.
Right. All right. So we got to pick every week we pick the album or the 12-inch record that would most necessarily be in the most epic record collection that you could create. So which Van Halen 12-inch are we picking? I think we're unanimous, and I think there's not much suspense in this since we already discussed it. But Chad, I'll let you make the pick.
Yeah, I would pick Merry Melodies.
I would too.
My choice.
I second that.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a cool thing, and I think, I think there is some. You consider for a second either 1984 or their self-titled original album. You'd even consider.
I would consider the 90s.
Born Lawful Carnal Knowledge, just because it's a tough one to get, and it has it does have a classic song on it, at least a classic pop culture nostalgia song for sure. But I think we got to go with Merry Melodies, and we got to go with making sure that it's the real Merry Melodies and not a bootleg or a counterfeit. And so. With that, we're going to sign off. Next time, we will have Drew with us. We actually plan on having a few guests with us eventually, although we might want to lock them in before they listen to this one, because I'm not sure they're going to be too thrilled about our unless they're huge. Unless we do get someone from the WWF on. Which
I think we should.
I don't think anyone is alive. I think we should. He actually died in 2009, so it wouldn't be a great podcast.
Cyndi Lauper, maybe. We could definitely get Corey Feldman at the very least.
Yeah,
with some Goonies ties.
Right. I would love to get Cyndi Lauper. I dig Cyndi Lauper a lot. I actually was just learning to play some Cyndi Lauper on the piano the other day. It's a very easy song to play, time after time. Super easy one to play the melody and the background, because it's all basically 3 chords and the same 3 notes over and over again. But I dig Cyndi Lauper. She was one of my first crushes. But that's back when my crushes were innocent. Early Madonna and Cyndi Lauper were early crushes. My crush on Lita Ford was much less innocent.
What was Cyndi Lauper in? It was some I want to say VH1 show where she's like, "Who are you, and why are you so unusual?"
Don't know the answer. Was like one of those houses that like had Flavor Flav in it, like some sort of like VH1 house where they just shoved a bunch of. Where they shoved a bunch of
one of the behind the 80s, like one of the I Love the 80s episodes, probably.
It must have been, yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember that. But
really killed the vibe on the podcast.
Killed the vibe. Yep. All right. Well, so we do want to thank my son, Jacob Harwood, who is the guitarist for Element 88 and did our VMG theme song, which you can hear in the background as we speak. And we want to invite you back next time. We hope to get back onto a regular schedule of doing these podcasts. And we will have Drew, hopefully next time to keep us in line, to be a little bit more professional and a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more focused on music and vinyl than on vintage WWF wrestlers. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back next time.